Hello and welcome back to Cookies Enabled. We are going to be doing a cool episode on history of the PC and computers, and we're going to be going back into history here and finding out how they were created, where they came from, how they were built and put together, and really how we got our machines today. So stick around and find out more. So, we start our story with computer history in 1912 with Alan Turing's birth, and this genius flies through high school and college and universities and really flew through the fact that he knew math, arithmetic, music, all that stuff really, really well, almost, magically, some would say. So this allowed him to really advance through college and universities and get into a secret government program to help them try to figure out the Enigma machine. And Alan realized, not only could we do all of this information of trying to break this code faster with machines, just like the Nazis did. Why don't we build a machine that can also decode all of this for us? And it would be way faster than us trying to figure it out on our own. And that's exactly what he did. To make a really, really long story short, again, there's a lot of in and outs here. Alan built a machine that was massive. This machine was the size of a warehouse. It had lots of cables, vacuum tubes, lots of chambers and dials to change. And you actually programmed this machine with, what you thought your cipher was, and then it would output you a solution. And not very quickly. It sometimes would take days to just get basic information from this machine. But it did actually work, and eventually, all because the Nazis always ended their letters with the Hail Nazi, or Hail Hitler, I'm sorry. And since that was always on the letterhead, or at the bottom of the letter, they could type that into the machine and have it spit out the correct conversion of the letter. So that way they could decode everything and go from there. And really the sad part of Alan is that because he was found out to be a homosexual, unfortunately, he was really publicly shamed. All his equipment was destroyed. It was also a secret government program, so of course it wasn't going to come to light that they had any of this equipment. And it also wasn't the only machine. There was also other machines that he had built. They were also destroyed, smashed. All of the evidence was burned and or destroyed, shredded, whatnot. And so for decades, nobody even knew this man existed and or what he had done for his country and his people. And then we kind of see a transition in technology. Well, here comes a company known as Bell. They worked on telephones, obviously. You may have heard of them. And they created what is known as the circuit board. And the circuit board allowed them to compress multiple things down in micro size and put them all onto one board. And this allowed things to be way faster. Instead of the machine having to send it from one giant machine to another giant machine and another giant building, it was right next to itself on this tiny little chip. And everything you have today, everything you see in the background here, everything from your phone, anything that's electronic has a circuit board somewhere in it. And so this is really a big revolutionary change. So you have the University of Pennsylvania working on the ENIAC in 1946. And this is the same kind of machine that you have Alan Turing building as well, really on the other side of the globe, using vacuum tubes and chambers and wires and whatnot. And these machines, again, they were pretty big. This one was actually bigger than the Turing machine, the Victory that he was building. So again, you kind of have this simultaneous. They're all very secretive. Even Colossus, which was a British military code-breaking machine, was also very kind of hidden from the public for years and decades. So when we look at the future and the past and how things evolved, you see it going from mechanisms to machines to really the birth of the digital realm, which is where everything becomes a binary, a 1 or a 0, and this is all controlled via switches and electronic pathways. And you don't really have this gear turning this and calculating this weight and that's changing that. None of that's happening. It's all being broken down basic to ones and zeros, and then those are adding up to other values and getting converted back out to an answer for you. So this was the first time we really have been able to break anything all the way down to a basic on or off structure, and that's really the birth of the digital age. That changed everything from there. And this is also where Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Bill Gates really all start coming into the picture here. And this is really the late 1960s, early 1970s. We see Steve Jobs meet up with Steve Wozniak. Steve Wozniak was already building small computers in his garage, or at least trying to anyway. And they were mostly just kind of jokes and little games and machines that he came up with that were just supposed to be fun. And they were. They were actually a lot of fun, actually. And he worked for a company known as Hewlett-Packard, or as we know him today, HP. It's the same company, but back then they only used to make printers. So when Steve Jobs learned about how Steve Wozniak is trying to build an actual personal computer for people to have in their house and use on their own for anything from games to spreadsheets, he wanted to be a part of that. So he teamed up with Steve Wozniak to not only build the machines, but try to market them. And that's where Steve Jobs really, as you know him, as kind of the front runner for Apple. While all that's going on with Apple, you've got Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, Steve Ballmer, and a few of his colleagues, which I'm sure you've heard over the years, and we'll get into those in other episodes, team up with a few of their college buddies, and they actually drop out of college during this as well, to write a program language for computers. At the time, a few basic computer machines had came out. One was known as the Altair, and it was actually a really big deal. People were buying it. The thing was that it had no programming. It just blinked and had switches and knobs on it, but it didn't do anything. So that's where Bill Gates came in. He found a way, and with his friends, to write a code that can actually program the computer and make it functional, actually have it do things for you. So that's what he did. He went to the guy that sold the Altair and said, "I'll sell you the software to put on all your machines, but I also want to sell it on my own and try to make money so people can put it on other machines." And the guy said, "Sure, absolutely. The money is in the hardware. Why not?" And thus Microsoft was born. Bill Gates did actually get a chance to meet Steve Jobs way at the early of our story. They were both in the same building. Microsoft obviously was trying to sell their software, and Apple was trying to sell their first machine, which obviously got all the focus. Nobody even knew Microsoft's in the building. Bill Gates tries to go say hi and introduce himself. And some stories say this actually was successful. Other stories say that they didn't actually get a chance to, and he just kind of gave up. So, I mean, I guess take it or leave it. Flash forward even 5 years, now Apple is a massive company, and they've got their own production there. This is where Steve is really on the hinges of his first, being fired from Apple. Really because he was just a loose cannon. He would storm into interviews and mock people and just be rude and obnoxious to his staff. He also created the first time we'd ever seen a civil war really inside of a company. He created the Macintosh team versus the Apple team, and this just tore Apple apart at the seams. Literally, you had anarchy inside the company while they're trying to build machines and pump out equipment. I mean, they're literally at each other's throats, killing each other, taking out, it was just a disaster zone of trying to figure everything out, honestly. And that was the main reason why he was fired the first time. So jumping back to Bill Gates, what happened to him, right? So he's still obviously running Windows, and if you think way back, or running Microsoft, I should say, he started again without DOS. He had just created that one program for the Altair, and that was it. They did create a few other random programs like Word and spreadsheets and things that just came out as well that you could install on your Mac, or you could install on your Lisa computer or whatnot. So as the machines were getting better, Microsoft was upgrading their software, And they had heard through the grapevine that a company that was just owned by one dude had created something called DOS, which was the disk operating system. And DOS was huge because it was going to revolutionize really how data was stored on the computers and regurgitated on the computer. It wasn't just this standard little thing. You could literally tell it to access specific files right from the get-go, or tell you a whole directory of every file on the computer. So that was huge. We didn't really have that back then. So what Microsoft did was Bill Gates said, we need this software. I want to take this software and go to IBM and sell it to them. And so he did, but they didn't have the software DOS just yet. He actually went to IBM, and sat down with the board of directors and their team and explained to him, I have software that will work great on your machines. It will fix all your problems. It is everything you've dreamed of. You are going to want this software. I want to be able to put it on all of your machines. And just like he did with the Altair, I want to be able to sell it separately as well. So Bill Gates actually bought the rights to DOS for $75,000, which at the time was a massive amount of money. That was equal to probably about $500,000 now, or maybe even closer to maybe $750,000 now. So massive amounts of money. And of course, this guy's like, I can't pass this up. So he sells the software to Bill Gates and his team at Microsoft. They rewrite it as DOS/Windows 3.1 and thus install it on every IBM machine that was sold, which was hundreds of thousands of machines across the globe, as well as sold at every retailer that you could buy any kind of electronic software at. There it was. And so that's the real birth of Microsoft, is that from there, they really just dominated the market, because every machine you'd go to the store to buy either had Microsoft on it, no operating system on it, or you had to buy an Apple. Those were your only options at the time. So it was really few and far between. Granted, Linux and whatnot was technically around, but it wasn't a free open application for people to just go get. It really wasn't like that. There was only very few people that even knew of what Linux was. So we're not getting into that. We'll get into that later, but primarily the evolution of Microsoft really was all on the software side, unlike Apple, which their evolution was strictly primarily with the evolution of the PC itself, with the Macintosh and the Apple II and so on and so forth. You have these progressions of, they were actually driving the hardware force while Microsoft was driving the software force across the globe. So you have this familiarity with how to use the machine, no matter what machine it is, because it's Microsoft, or you have the familiarity of the same hardware and the same software because you're always using Apple. So you have that familiarity, and that's how our system is now set up. So you can kind of think that internal war between these two companies for creating this amassed verse of what we have. Now you're probably thinking, well, where do the cell phones and stuff come into this? Well, that's because cell phones didn't come out until really into the early thousands. We have Steve Jobs back at Apple, and now he's releasing the iPod and the iPad and the iPhone and all of these devices. And there was a real push for this uniformity of making the computer more personal for that particular person and less for a whole group of people. So, instead of having it be personal for everyone, it was more personal for just that specific user. I want the background this way, I want my font this way, I want this that way, and that's how it was. And Apple at first didn't really give you much customization from at all, really. It was later on in the progression of the software that they started giving you those handles, and Microsoft was very much that way too. It really wasn't until about Windows 98 that you could even start changing your background, and screensavers and themes and stuff even started becoming a thing. They really weren't around until that time. So as you can tell, the progression of the PC was driven by both of those major companies in Silicon Valley, not only fighting over their dominance in the market, but fighting over the performance of the computer. Should it be more ubiquitous and everybody gets one, or should it be like, a select few? And I wanted to say that Apple was more, only a select few should have it, while Microsoft was saying everybody should have this ability. But you could literally flip that coin both ways, and you could see that Apple was literally trying to get computers for everyone, and that was literally Steve Jobs' goal. He wanted to make the machines more personal and make it something that you want to use and that you love to use. And Microsoft and Windows was more how we can make the machine more user-friendly with the software, rather than, smoke and mirrors and stuff. So you had two different ways of looking at the same situation, and they are both obviously still massive partners together in the globe today, and they work well together. And it wasn't until recently that now we see Microsoft, just in the last 10 years, have purchased a major manufacturer, which is Nokia. They actually bought out Nokia. Nokia wasn't doing well in the thousands. Really, when the iPhone came out, it really bashed Nokia. They had their foothold in the cell phone market up to that point, and when the iPhone came out, oh man, it just smashed them. Then you had even bigger companies coming out from other sides of the globe, like Asus and Samsung, which Asus had been around for a while, but now you're seeing their brand on the outside of the package, not just printed on a motherboard on the inside, and you didn't even know it was there. So some of these companies were going from smaller, little tiny, chip manufacturers to massive household name brands. And that was a huge shift for a lot of the market, actually. And it might, when the internet really took off, a lot of people say that the internet boom had a lot to do with both Apple and Microsoft pushing the internet usage and whatnot, because obviously Google wasn't even there yet. So it really, I don't think it had anything to do with that. Really, the military had already been using the internet for years, and really all the internet is that they found out if you had two machines that were computers and you put modems in them, they could literally send data from one machine to the other flawlessly, just fluently, like it's water. And so they loved this, and this was a way for them to literally connect all of their machines together, and thus the internet was born. That is literally how it started. And so really it came from the internet, or came from our military, that we had the internet, and it was just released to the public, and that's when everything took off. So of course you're going to have those startup companies, and they're just going to dump on stuff, and most of them were fake, and most of them were just totally made up companies, but a lot of them did stay around. Google obviously is one of our main ones that we go to every single day, and it is always probably going to be around. Before Google, though, I mean, we had so many random search engines, and none of them were anything like Google is. Even to this day, Google is still phenomenally better in comparison. So, interesting stuff. Well, thank you again for tuning in with us today, and I hope you definitely learned something. Just keep in mind, all of our amazing electronics that we have today did actually start with just wooden beads being slid across a little wooden slot. That was literally how all of this was created. Just years and centuries come by, and thus we had all of these new creations, all from Alan Turing to Bell and so on and so forth, and now we have our amazing digital technology that we love and use every day. And I hope that you enjoy and understand a little bit more of your machines and mechanisms and how they work together to bring us our entertainment. But tune in next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe our channel, and I'll definitely be looking for you next time. Thanks again. And DOS, the operating system, comes in and changes some things because I got a phone call. The Enigma machine, am I saying that right? The Enigma